My name is Marina. I'm 52 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. That evening, at a fancy restaurant where our family and friends had gathered to celebrate my daughter's college graduation, my husband, Brent, stood up amid the sound of clinking glasses and cheerful toasts. But instead of raising his glass to our daughter, he declared loud and clear, "I'm starting a new chapter in life, without Marina." The entire room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for outrage, for a breakdown, for me to scream. But I simply smiled, reached into my purse and placed a black envelope right in front of him. He had no idea that inside that envelope was something that would cost him everything. Have you ever been betrayed on a day that was supposed to be the happiest of your life? If you've ever felt that kind of heartbreak, share your story in the comments, hit like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Stay with me because what happened next was far crueler than anyone could have imagined. I used to teach economics at a community college in Charlotte. People often said I had a special gift for explaining complicated concepts in simple ways, especially for older students returning to school. I loved that job. But when Brent launched his first real estate company, everything changed. "You're great with numbers and you trust me. No one is better suited to be my CFO than you," Brent said one late night after dinner in our tiny rental apartment. I looked into his eyes, filled with confidence, and nodded. We were young then, broke but full of ambition. I thought once the company stabilized, I'd return to teaching. But that someday just kept drifting further. I gave birth to Emily 3 years later, and raised her almost entirely on my own while Brent poured all his time into building his empire. I never complained. I believed in him. I believed in his promise that every sacrifice today would mean a happy family tomorrow. When Brent's mother had a stroke, I was the one who brought her to live with us. For 6 years I cared for her. Every meal, every pill, every midnight trip to the emergency room. Brent was always too busy. Another meeting, another urgent project. On holidays, while other wives got vacations or jewelry, I received hurried thank yous, sometimes a gift box clearly prepared by his assistant. I still remember the time when Emily was in middle school, burning with a high fever, barely conscious. I stayed up 3 nights straight watching over her, tending to my mother-in-law, coaxing Emily to sip water. Brent didn't come home. He texted, "I trust you'll handle it. You're amazing." I held my phone, tears falling silently, unsure if it was from exhaustion, sadness, or the numbness slowly settling inside me. After my mother-in-law passed, I thought I could finally rest. But Brent said the company was expanding and I needed to put a few assets under my name for tax reasons. I agreed. Over time, I no longer held the house title. I lost access to our main accounts. When I asked about it, he laughed. "We're a team. You handle home, I handle business." That's when the coldness began. No more holding hands on walks, no more reading or watching movies together at night. He came home later and later, sometimes without even bothering to explain. Some nights, all I heard was the front door creaking, the shower running, and then his door shutting. I slept in a different world, separated from the man just one door away. I tried asking, "Is something going on? I feel like we're strangers." Brent shrugged with a faint smirk. "You're overthinking. Just focus on Emily. I'll take care of the money stuff." That answer felt like a steel door slammed in my face. I started suspecting things, not out of some jealous instinct but because I understand finance. I noticed inconsistencies in our expenses, fewer statements arriving, email alerts for accounts I'd never set up. When I asked, he brushed it off. "We're testing some new financial structures at the company, complicated stuff. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I wasn't some naive wife trailing behind. I had stood in front of classrooms, advised young investors. I used to understand Brent better than he understood himself. But now he lied to me with the same eyes I once trusted most. Emily earned a full scholarship to Duke. I cried from pride. Brent barely blinked. He said, "That's good. At least we don't have to worry about paying for it." No congratulations, no campus visit, no hug. I saw Emily's eyes dim, though she still smiled and said, "It's okay, Dad's busy." I started wondering, when did sacrifice become an expectation? When did I turn into the woman people assumed was just living off her husband, when I was the one holding our entire life together for decades? He came home late, smelling like cologne. Unknown texts that vanished quickly. Phone calls he always took in another room. I wasn't blind anymore. I started collecting those fragments of doubt, piecing together a picture I wasn't yet ready to name. Until one morning while Brent was out golfing, I found a cream-colored envelope tucked into his desk drawer. It was addressed to Claire Donovan. Inside was a document confirming the opening of a children's savings account with an initial deposit of $75,000. Legal guardian, Brent Harrison. Beneficiary, Liam Donovan. Date of birth. I dropped the paper. My hands were ice. That date, I knew it. I was nursing his mother full-time then. Brent had said he was on a business trip in Florida. I didn't say anything for weeks. I still made dinner. Still booked dentist appointments for Emily. Still reminded Brent to take his blood pressure meds. But something inside me had shifted. A door opened. And I knew behind it was a storm Brent had never seen coming. I sat for hours in my leather chair by the window, that document laid out before me. Liam Donovan's name printed in black and white. Brent's signature. A line at the bottom. Trust established for humanitarian purposes in case of mother's death. Every detail matched, cold and clinical. Claire Donovan. I hadn't heard that name in years. She used to be Brent's administrative assistant when the company first expanded. I remembered her frizzy red hair, always rushing but polite, respectful of boundaries. She only worked for about a year before abruptly resigning to care for her sick mother. There was nothing suspicious then. I even gave her a small farewell gift, a book about financial independence for women, along with a handwritten card, wishing you peace on your new journey. Years later, while sorting through old papers, I stumbled upon a tragic coincidence. A fatal accident in Winston-Salem. A single mother named Claire Donovan had died, leaving behind a 7-year-old son. I remembered reading that article. I even pulled out my credit card and donated $200 to the Liam's Future fund her relative had set up. Back then, something tugged at my chest. A nameless thread tightening around my ribs. I reopened my laptop and searched for the article. The details sounded like any other local tragedy, until I looked closer at a black and white photo of Claire holding Liam. That boy's eyes. His narrow chin. That familiar furrowed brow. I had seen that face 100 times on Brent. I called a law office I'd worked with years ago during a real estate dispute. I didn't want anyone in our circle to know. The attorney I chose was a woman named Sarah Mitchell, known for her discretion and professionalism. She listened carefully, then said in a calm voice, "I think you'll need a private investigator. There are things you shouldn't uncover yourself if you want admissible evidence." 2 days later, I met Ethan Pierce, a former police officer who specialized in financial fraud. Now a private investigator, he was quiet, observant, and from the moment we met, I trusted him. "What do you want from me?" Ethan asked. "I need to know if Brent is the biological father of a boy named Liam Donovan. And if so, I need to know where the money for the trust account came from." He nodded, opened a notebook. "Give me about 3 weeks." Those 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I still made breakfast for Emily, still went to church every Sunday, still told everyone Brent was busy expanding the Florida branch. Inside, it felt like the walls were collapsing floor by floor. But on the outside, I remained the faithful wife. One morning, Ethan texted me, "We need to meet in person." I arrived at Sarah's office, where Ethan was already waiting with a thick stack of documents. He laid out each photo on the table, numbering them carefully. Photo number 1. Brent holding Liam in the yard of a small house on the outskirts of Asheville. It wasn't a secret snapshot. It was from a home security camera Ethan had obtained through a contact. Photo number 2. Bank statements showing periodic transfers from my and Brent's joint account into a trust account labeled LD Foundation, managed by Brent Harrison. Photo number 3. A rental agreement under Claire Donovan's name, with Brent Harrison listed as the secondary guarantor. Photo number 4. Liam's birth certificate with the father's name left blank. But under health insurance information, the listed provider was Brent Harrison. I sat frozen, my hand gripping the chair's arm until my knuckles turned white. Ethan slid another set of papers toward me. "This is a copy of the life insurance policy Claire signed before she passed away. The sole beneficiary in the event of her death, Liam Donovan. The legal guardian listed on the policy, her sister, Julie Donovan. But the person who wrote the long-term financial support letter on Julie's behalf? Also Brent." I couldn't breathe. Sarah looked at me. "I need to ask clearly. What do you want to do next? There was only one answer. I want custody of Liam. Sarah furrowed her brow. Are you sure? I nodded. If I don't take him in, Brent will. And I can't let a child grow up in a world controlled by a man who can lie to his wife, deny his own son, and treat shared assets like his personal bank. Sarah nodded slowly. We'll prepare a petition for alternative guardianship. Since Claire is deceased and Julie's financial situation is limited, if you can present a reasonable care plan, the court may approve it. What about Brent? I asked. Ethan glanced up from his notes. I don't think he knows you found out. And if we want this to be legally solid, it's best to keep things quiet until the guardianship is approved. I picked up the file, feeling the world tilt. Part of me ached, ashamed, furious, but another part, deeper and steadier, was ready. That child was innocent. And I had lived in silence for far too long to let the truth be twisted one more time. I drove nearly 4 hours to the small town where Julie Donovan lived and worked. She was a nurse at a local clinic and, according to Ethan, had been Liam's sole caregiver since Claire's passing. I had never met Julie before, but when I stepped into the coffee shop where we agreed to meet, I recognized her instantly. Her face resembled Claire's, but her eyes were guarded, her manner cautious, like someone too familiar with betrayal. I walked over to the table. Julie stood and offered a tentative handshake. You're Marina? Yes. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I sat down, trying to keep my voice calm. Julie placed 2 glasses of water down and went straight to the point. Ethan said you want custody of Liam? I nodded. I know it sounds strange, even too much. But if you'll let me, I'd like to explain everything. From the beginning. Julie said nothing, her eyes locked on mine. I began to talk. About my marriage to Brent. About Claire being his former assistant. About the documents I found. About discovering Liam was Brent's son. And finally, why I couldn't let Brent continue to control the boy's life. When I finished, I didn't justify, I didn't plead. Julie sat in silence for a long time before she finally spoke. My sister. She never told me Liam's father's name. But I had my suspicions. You know, sometimes I'd catch her crying in the kitchen thinking I was asleep. She once said, Julie, if anything ever happens to me, don't let Brent raise my son. I'd rather do this alone than have him grow up in a lie. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I don't want to replace Claire. I know I can't. But I want to protect Liam. I have the means, the time, and a kind of resolve Brent will never understand. Julie closed her eyes briefly. Liam needs a mother. A good one. And if my sister chose you, maybe I should believe in that too. I couldn't stop the tears. It wasn't pity. It was trust. And I knew I had just accepted a responsibility from which there was no turning back. We went over the details. Julie didn't want to lose contact with Liam entirely. I agreed. I wanted him to grow up knowing he had an aunt who loved him and understood where he came from. We decided to file for joint guardianship under a special clause, with plans to transfer full custody to me once things stabilized. Back home, Sarah and I began preparing a civil lawsuit against Brent for marital asset abuse, undisclosed transfers, and breach of financial obligations. We combed through everything. Ethan kept feeding us documents. I logged each date, each transaction, each photo, every email showing Brent sending money to Julie through intermediaries to avoid having his name attached. I remained perfectly composed. Brent had no idea. In fact, a few days later he even sent me a casual message. Book a table for Emily's graduation dinner. Need to invite a few partners. I read the message and replied with a single word, sure. We hadn't really been husband and wife for years. Now I was just keeping up appearances, until the moment was right. Sarah told me, if we want this case to hold weight, I need something that links the trust account to your joint business investments. Do you think Brent left a trace? I recalled a vague detail. One day Brent had asked me to print some documents from the company's internal server. While accessing it, I saw a folder labeled LD Holding, one he never mentioned. I hadn't been curious then. I just printed what he asked and closed the window. But now I knew. I think I know where to look. I returned to the company office one afternoon while Brent was at a meeting in Atlanta. My login still worked. I found the old folder. Inside were share transfer contracts, records of funds withdrawn from the company account into LD Holding, then moved again to LD Foundation. all digitally signed by Brent. I saved everything onto an encrypted hard drive and handed it to Sarah. "We have what we need," she said. "I'll file the lawsuit with civil court. And if things go the way I expect, the judge may call a preliminary hearing before the family court date." I sat alone in the empty office. The family photos were still on the walls. Me, Brent, and Emily when she was little. But now those images didn't hold memories. Just long silences, unsaid words, and dust settling on promises never kept. I turned off the lights, closed the door, and knew the game had entered its second round. But this time I was the one holding the board. I had just gotten home when I heard Brent's tires screech in the driveway. His headlights cut across the front of the house like he was trying to expose something. The front door burst open before I could even step off the stairs. "Marina." His voice echoed with fury. "What the hell are you doing?" I descended the stairs slowly, holding a glass of water, my voice calm. "Hello, Brent. Please close the door. Our daughter doesn't need to hear another one of your scenes." "You handed me that envelope in the middle of Emily's graduation dinner," he growled, waving a crumpled stack of papers, "and then you disappeared? You had no right to do that. What you do is considered your right, but what I do is too much." I looked him straight in the eye. "I simply responded to your announcement, in a far more gracious way than you humiliating me in front of 50 guests." Brent threw the papers down on the table. "Divorce? You really think you can just push me out of my own life that easily?" I walked closer, quietly opened a drawer, pulled out a thick folder and slid it across to him. "This isn't just a divorce filing. It's a guardianship petition for Liam. And I've already been granted temporary custody by the court." Brent froze, completely still for a few seconds, like the air had been knocked out of him. What did you say?" "I'm Liam's temporary legal guardian." Julie agreed. "I have the resources, the legal standing and financial records that prove you used our shared assets to establish an illegal trust." Brent roared and stepped closer. "You're insane. He's my son." I didn't back away. I looked at him as if seeing a stranger in my own home for the first time. "And you never wanted to claim him, until he became your financial liability. Don't pretend you care. Claire never said he was mine. She didn't have to. The documents you signed, the accounts you opened, the health insurance you paid for, they all say it for you." His jaw tightened. "I was just helping her. She had no one." "Helping? By hiding it from your wife? Using joint funds? Setting up a fund in your son's name without ever telling me?" I wasn't angry anymore. Just hollow. Brent slammed his hand on the armrest. "You don't have the right to take my son." "What right do you have, Brent? Have you ever held him? Ever showed up for his birthday? Or is he just a burden you tried to hide from the world?" He stepped back, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for someone to take his side. But the house was silent, except for the old clock ticking like a cold verdict. "Julie betrayed me. And so did you. I can't believe you two are working together against me," he said, his voice cracking. I shook my head slowly. "No one betrayed you. You separated yourself from everything, with your own choices." Brent slumped into a chair, his face pale. "What are you going to do? Raise him like your own? Let Emily live under the same roof as my illegitimate son?" "Don't call him that. Liam is a child with value and dignity. And Emily," I paused, "she already knows. And she deserves to know the truth, rather than grow up idolizing a man who only thinks of himself." He looked at me for the first time without rage, just confusion. "You told her." "I wasn't the first. Emily found a photo of Claire in some papers I hadn't had time to file away. She's smart enough to put the pieces together. And hurt enough that I don't have to hide it anymore." Brent covered his face with his hand, his voice dropping. "Marina, are you really going to end all of this?" I looked at the man who had once meant the world to me. "I'm not ending anything. I'm finally protecting what I should have protected a long time ago." He stood unsteady, like someone just emerging from a storm they never saw coming. "I need time," I said softly, my voice calm and firm. "You had 28 years. Brent walked out, but I didn't turn to watch him go. In this house filled with silent memories, I heard myself breathe more clearly than ever before. And I knew those walls had already crumbled. Not from anger, but from truth that could no longer be undone. I was organizing some documents my lawyer had sent over in a small box when I heard Emily's car pull into the driveway. The door slammed harder than usual. Her familiar but hurried steps echoed down the wooden hallway. I looked up as she appeared in the living room doorway, her face flushed, her eyes swollen. Her expression held a storm of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. "Mom," Emily said, her voice trembling, "is it true?" I stood up, no need to ask what she was talking about. News spreads faster than wind these days. A friend must have seen or heard something at the dinner. I stepped toward her, reaching for her shoulder, but she stepped back. "Dad has a son. A child. With someone who used to work for him. And you knew." I stayed silent. I didn't deny it. I didn't try to explain it away. I just looked at her, with eyes that held all the pain I had carried alone for months. "I worked 3 jobs during my last year just to cover my tuition," Emily whispered. "I sold used books, cleaned houses, skipped lunches, while he was sending money to a child I didn't even know existed." Her voice broke. "How long have you known?" "Almost 3 months," I said gently but clearly. "I found out from a forgotten bank statement. Then little by little the pieces started to fall into place. But I couldn't tell you, not because I thought you were weak or incapable." "Then why?" Emily asked. "Why did you stay silent?" I swallowed hard. "Because I wanted you to have a peaceful spring. A graduation without bitterness. I tried to keep everything intact just a little longer. For you. But Dad ruined all of that." Emily's voice dropped as she sank onto the couch. "I thought that night was a nightmare. But it was only the doorway to a truth you kept from me." I sat beside her. "I was wrong not to share it with you sooner. I was wrong to think I could carry it all. But I never wanted you to bear that kind of hurt, especially from someone you trusted your whole childhood." Emily lowered her head, her long hair falling over her face. Her shoulders trembled softly, like she was wrestling something deep inside. "I used to be proud of Dad," she said without looking up. "Even when he wasn't around, even when he always had work excuses. I believed he was responsible, that he was the rock of our family. I used to hope that someday I'd marry someone just like him." I gently touched her hand. "You're not wrong for believing in something good." Emily raised her head, her eyes swollen but no longer confused. "That boy, Liam, right? Claire Donovan's son." I nodded. "He's 7. Claire died in an accident. I'm his temporary guardian now, through an agreement with his Aunt Julie. We're waiting on the court for official custody." She exhaled long and heavy. "So you didn't just forgive, you chose to raise the child of the man who betrayed you?" I pressed my lips together. "Liam did nothing wrong. He didn't choose the circumstances he was born into. And he has no one to protect him but me." "I get it," Emily said after a long pause. "I'm not angry at the boy. I just can't believe Dad did this, to you, to me, to himself." I gently squeezed her hand, afraid too much pressure might shatter her. "I can't change what happened. But I can make sure you and Liam never have to live under a lie again." Emily nodded slowly. "I want to meet Liam." I was surprised but relieved. "I can arrange that. Julie, his aunt, really likes you. They don't live far from here." "I need time," Emily said, her voice gentler now. "But I don't want to avoid it. If that boy is my brother, I want to understand what that really means." I brushed her hair gently, the way I used to when she was little. "You're a strong, compassionate young woman. I've never been prouder of anyone." She rested her head on my shoulder. It felt like a storm had just passed, leaving part of me wrecked, but also revealing something tender in its wake. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing, just listening to our hearts slow down in the quiet of a home that was changing by the day. I was sitting in Sarah's law office when Ethan walked in, holding a thick file, his face drawn with tension. He placed the documents on the table in front of me and stayed silent for a few seconds, as if weighing where to begin. "I traced several transactions linked to the LD Foundation," he said, his voice dropping. "There's one connected account that shows up repeatedly. Every time Brent transferred money to LD Foundation, part of it was funneled into an account under Deborah Miles' name." I frowned. "Deborah? You mean Deborah, my friend?" "Yes." Deborah Miles, an independent accountant, worked with Brent from the time he first opened his real estate office. She's the one who introduced Claire as an assistant. And she also managed Brent's personal finances until about a year ago. I didn't say a word. My mind played back every conversation, every handshake, every time Deborah came to my house with that slightly burnt apple pie she claimed she made herself. A friend of 15 years. The one who sat with me for hours when my mother died. The one who held my hand when Emily was hospitalized with an allergic reaction. I tried to stay calm. Did she know about Liam? Ethan nodded. Not just knew. In several emails we recovered from the company's old server, Brent asked Deborah to help transfer part of his assets to a third party. She proposed putting a lakeside property near Lake Norman under her name, saying, "My name's clean and Marina won't suspect a thing." Sarah placed her hand on the file, flipping to a page that included a copy of the property deed. Sure enough, the listed owner was Deborah Miles. At the bottom were her signature and Brent's. I felt my stomach twist. Nausea rose in my throat, but I forced it back down. "What did she say when you confronted her?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "No official response yet," Ethan said. "But I did speak to one of Deborah's former associates. That person said a few months ago, Deborah began pulling money out of a personal trust and started prepping to move to Charleston. According to them, she said, 'I just need to hold out a few more months. Then everything will be mine.'" I looked at Sarah. "Is that enough to press charges?" "With the evidence Ethan has gathered and her direct involvement in purchasing property using misappropriated marital funds," Sarah replied, "we can charge her as an accomplice in financial fraud and aiding in the misappropriation of marital assets. More than that, it significantly strengthens your case in court." I sat there for a moment, silent. In my mind, every image of Deborah collapsed into something hollow. The walks through Freedom Park, sharing cappuccinos, talking about absent husbands and growing children. The way she listened as I vented about Brent, while helping him cover everything up. That kind of betrayal didn't feel like Brent's. It was quieter, deeper, like a bloodless cut that spread without warning. That night I called Deborah. After 3 rings she answered. "Marina? What's going on? Why are you calling me this late?" Her voice was soft, familiar. "Where are you right now?" I asked directly. "At home." "Why?" "I know about the Lake Norman property. I know about Liam. I know every transfer you helped Brent make. I know your name is listed as the owner." Silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, louder now, like she realized she couldn't pretend. "Marina, I didn't have a choice," Brent said. "I've read the emails, Deborah. Don't lie." I cut her off. "I didn't call to hear excuses." She exhaled. "I needed the money. I lost a major client last year. Brent said it was just paperwork, that no one would get hurt. And I believed him. I trusted him." "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Did you trust Brent more than a friend of 15 years? I didn't think it would go this far. I planned to give the property back once everything settled." "No, Deborah. You were planning to run. Move to Charleston with money from my family." I heard a faint sob on the other end. But I didn't feel pity. "Not anymore. Tomorrow my lawyer will send a formal notice demanding property ownership be reviewed in court," I said. "You can cooperate, or I'll let the prosecutor charge you as a full accomplice." "Marina, I'm sorry." Her voice was rough. "I really didn't think it would end like this." "It's not an ending," I replied. "It's just the consequence." I hung up. No screaming. No tears. Just a cold emptiness, like a winter draft slipping into every corner of memory. For a long time I thought losing Brent was the worst thing that could happen. But now I knew, there are betrayals far quieter, deeper, and without any clear warning signs. The morning of the preliminary hearing, Charlotte was drizzling. I walked into the courtroom in a simple gray suit, holding a neatly organized file I had prepared through sleepless nights. Ethan sat behind me, sharp as ever. Sarah sat beside me, giving a small nod, the signal that it was time. Across the aisle, Brent entered with his attorney, a middle-aged man who looked rushed and slightly overwhelmed, as if he had just been briefed. Deborah didn't show up, despite being subpoenaed as a key witness. According to Ethan, she had filed for exemption, citing emotional distress. But it didn't matter. I already had what she couldn't retract. The judge, Ruth McMillan, a woman in her 60s with seasoned eyes and a no-nonsense tone, called the session to order. After standard formalities, she asked both sides to present their materials. Sarah stood, opened the binder, and began in a steady, clear voice. We are presenting evidence of financial fraud, marital asset abuse, concealment through third-party transfers, and most notably, egregious defamation of the plaintiff by the defendant, Mr. Brent Harrison. Brent frowned and leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something. The attorney flipped through documents quickly, nodding, though it was unclear how much he really understood. Then Sarah played a recording from a device on the table. Brent's voice rang out through the speakers. Not angry, not accidental, but deliberate and cold. She thinks I love it? It's just a biological obligation. I did my part. Now she should disappear and let me live the rest of my life in peace. The courtroom went silent. I didn't look at Brent. I looked straight ahead, at the white wall behind the judge's bench where the seal of North Carolina hung. Sarah paused the recording. This was recorded in the plaintiff's home, in a state that allows single-party consent. And this is just a small portion of the evidence we've submitted to the court. Judge McMillan flipped through the pages quickly, pausing longer at the list of illicit transfers and the property registered under Deborah's name. She adjusted her glasses and looked straight at Brent. Mr. Harrison, do you deny these conversations took place? Brent stood up, trying to appear composed, but his trembling hand on the table betrayed him to everyone in the room. I was angry. I didn't think you'd be recorded? The judge interrupted. Or didn't think it would ever be made public? Brent's attorney rose, attempting to interject, but Judge McMillan raised her hand to stop him. I have reviewed all submitted materials. There is sufficient evidence that the defendant deliberately transferred assets through intermediaries to avoid disclosure, directly violating financial clauses in the marital agreement. Additionally, his demeaning remarks and his willful neglect of parental responsibility will be taken into account when deciding visitation rights. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a quiet wave of relief, like a breeze after a long storm settling in my chest. Judge McMillan delivered the verdict slowly, each word falling like a needle touching still water. The plaintiff, Mrs. Marina Harrison, shall retain full ownership of the residence located at 2721 Colonial Street, all retirement accounts contributed during the marriage, and 70% of remaining shared assets. Furthermore, the defendant shall pay a defamation settlement to the plaintiff in the amount of $1,300,000, due within 90 days. Brent looked shaken. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something, but no one on their side said another word. As for the custody of minor child Liam Donovan, the judge continued, since there has been no formal request for guardianship by the defendant, and given the defendant's recorded statements and demeanor, the court rules, Mr. Brent Harrison shall temporarily lose visitation rights to Liam until a dedicated paternity hearing is conducted, including a mandatory psychological evaluation and a complete financial review. It was as if the entire courtroom exhaled. Ethan lightly tapped my shoulder from the row behind. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes shining with calm satisfaction. We had done everything by the book. Now Brent would finally face the consequences of what he thought would stay hidden forever. When court adjourned, Brent approached me. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight as if he still couldn't believe what had just happened. I stood my ground. You don't know what you've just done, Marina. I know exactly what I've done, I replied. I've defended the worth of my life, and of a child who didn't deserve to be discarded like garbage. Brent didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out of the courtroom, his shoulders rigid like a man trying to hide the collapse he knew had already begun. I watched him go, not with hatred but like a woman who had walked through fire and was finally learning how to breathe again. I stood by the second-floor window of a renovated red brick building in downtown Charlotte, holding a cup of cold coffee, filled with a strange mix of emotions. A small sign mounted on the front entrance bore a name I had designed myself, with the font Emily chose. Modern but steady. Marina Financial Transitions, financial guidance for women after crisis. The center wasn't large. Just 3 offices, 1 group consultation room, and a small reception desk with fresh flowers I replaced each week. But for me it was everything. In the first week we had exactly 1 client. A woman in her 40s wearing a worn-out coat, her hands trembling after just moving out from the home she'd shared with her husband for 18 years. She didn't need professional advice right away, Just a place to sit, exhale, and finally say out loud that she had been betrayed. I didn't show her spreadsheets or boot up my laptop. I just made her a cup of hot tea and listened. Then came a second client. Then a third. Each with their own story, but as I began connecting the pieces, I realized the common thread was always the same. The silence women were expected to keep to preserve the image of a family. Just like I had once done. Emily now worked with me 3 days a week. She came up with the idea of starting a TikTok account to simplify financial concepts for older women. I laughed, saying, I can't even remember my Facebook password. But within a week she had turned me into the finance mom, adored by hundreds of single moms across the state. One afternoon while I was printing contracts, Liam came racing into the room with muddy shoes, holding a dinosaur model and shouting, "Mom! I made it fly." I stopped and looked at that little face, glowing with pride. I thought back to the first day I brought him home. He curled up in a corner, too scared to make eye contact. But after so many nights reading together, brushing teeth side by side, wiping away tears from nightmares, he had opened his heart. Now, Liam was no longer afraid when someone called him a fatherless child. He understood he had a mom, a sister, and a real family. That evening we had spaghetti for dinner. Emily talked about her new media campaign while Liam proudly explained his latest Lego project. The table buzzed with laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in years, one that I'd rediscovered not through money or success, but through the freedom of being wholly myself. After dinner, as I loaded the dishwasher, Emily walked over with a glass of water. "Are you tired, Mom?" I smiled. "Tired, but at peace." She leaned against the wall, hesitant. "When I was younger, I used to think you were just good at cooking and taking care of people. But now I think the thing you're best at is living by your values." I turned and gently touched her hand. I used to think my worth was in my sacrifice. But now I know, real worth is knowing your limits and what's worth protecting for yourself. That night, as I tucked Liam into bed, he wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you so much, Mom. If you had been my mom from the beginning, maybe I wouldn't have been so scared of the dark." I kissed his forehead, pulled the blanket up, and whispered back, "Now you have a mom. And I'm not going anywhere." Every morning when I open the center's doors, I walk past that little sign and pause for just a moment to remember the woman who once stood trembling in court, but didn't bow her head. That woman is still me. Only now she's someone who learned to love herself before loving anyone else. And more importantly, she's someone who uses her past wounds to offer new safety to those still feeling lost. That afternoon, the air in Charlotte felt unusually soft. The lavender-eyed planted along the hallway began to bloom, releasing a gentle fragrance with every breeze. The center was celebrating its 1-year anniversary. Staff, colleagues, past clients I'd helped, even neighbors who sometimes watched Liam all came. Emily handled all the event planning. She told me, "Mom, don't worry about anything, just say a few words at the end. I've got the rest." I sat in the front row watching everyone chat cheerfully around the simple dessert table, and suddenly felt a wave of disbelief that I'd come this far. 1 year ago, I walked out of a courtroom hollow and unsure how to begin again. Now I sat in a warmly lit room surrounded by women holding hands, daring to speak truths they once only whispered inside. When Emily stepped onto the small platform in the corner, her eyes found mine first before looking to the room. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice strong but warm, "and I'm the daughter of the most courageous woman I know. A woman who turned betrayal into opportunity, pain into strength, and a closed door into a gateway to something new. Today, we're not just celebrating 1 year of Marina financial transitions, we're celebrating the day my mom chose herself." Applause erupted. I stood and walked slowly to the podium. Their eyes didn't look at me as a success story, they looked at me as a survivor who returned to lead. I took a breath and held the mic. "I once thought I was just a betrayed wife," I began, my voice trembling but unbroken. "I used to believe that if I stayed quiet long enough, sacrificed enough, marriage would be a safe place. But the truth is, nothing is safe if we don't protect our dignity. Now I know. I'm a mother, a leader, and a woman who lives by her values. And that's something no one can take away." The room went still for a beat, then applause filled the space again. I looked down and saw Emily wiping tears. Across the room, Liam was carefully picking candy from a glass jar, and when he noticed me watching, he looked up and smiled. I smiled back and nodded. After the ceremony, when most of the guests had left, I returned to the small office to retrieve my shawl. On the desk was an ivory envelope with no return address. I opened it. Inside was Julie Donovan's flowing, gentle handwriting. Dear Marina, there are debts that cannot be measured by money or law. You saved my nephew's life, not just by giving him a home but by restoring his faith. Every time Liam talks about his mother, his eyes light up as if he's never been hurt. I believe Claire is watching over him somewhere and she will be forever grateful to you. Julie. I set the letter down, feeling a lump in my throat. Those simple words were the clearest proof of what I had always aimed for. Rebirth does not begin by erasing the past, but by choosing to see it with new eyes. My phone vibrated. The screen showed the caller ID, Brent. I stood still for a moment. My finger hovered over the answer button. Then I turned off the phone. No voicemail, no hold, no hesitation. Outside the window, Emily was chasing Liam across the yard, her smile bright and wide. Liam laughed heartily, still clutching his worn blue dinosaur. I stepped outside, the old wooden door creaking softly behind me, a quiet full stop to a chapter now closed. I walked toward my two children, where the sunset stretched warmly over the stone porch of our little home, the home I call my own with all the peace in my heart. Every woman who walks through a broken chapter carries her own scars, but also the chance to find herself again, if she dares to keep going. I lost so much to get here. Trust, innocence, even those I once called friends. But I've gained something far more precious. The growth of my daughter, Liam's carefree laughter, and a life where I no longer need anyone's permission to be myself. What do you think about the journey I've been on? Have you ever faced the choice between enduring quietly and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your story. Please share it in the comments. Maybe by speaking out you'll help someone silently weathering their own storm. If this story touches something in your heart, please follow the channel to continue walking alongside me and my little family in the stories ahead, about lessons learned, changes made, and the surprises life always brings. Because who knows? Sometimes it's just beyond the door of our deepest pain that the light begins to shine.